Probably ready. Actually, I want to ask you a question and I want you to sit with it for a second. The IRS showed up tomorrow and asked to review your Opportunity Zone fund. Would you be ready? Not kind of ready, not probably ready, actually ready. Clean documentation, solid audit trail, every filing current and compliant. I want to know if you think that you'd pass all of your asset tests. Would you be able to explain to the IRS exactly what you did with your Opportunity Zone transaction? Would you be able to unpack it in a storybook format? If you hesitated on that question, this session is for you. And I understand the anxiety that can happen as a result of not perceiving that you're ready. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We're here to unpack those items to try to get you to a place of peace. I'm Ashley Tison, the OZ Sherpa. Our team at OZ Pros has helped investors defer over $1 billion in taxes through Opportunity Zones. And we've set up more than 1,000 Opportunity Zone entities. This is all we do every single day. And here's something I can tell you from firsthand experience after doing this for, man, it's coming up on 8 years now. 8 years of doing nothing but Opportunity Zones, eating OZs, breathing OZs, sleeping OZs, even dreaming about Opportunity Zones. They say that you know when you're fluent in a foreign language when you start dreaming in that foreign language. And folks, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I dream in Opportunity Zones. I literally have dreams about them, which is sometimes cool and sometimes not so cool. I guess it depends on what the dream is. But I want to bring this back to compliance, and I want to bring it back to the compliance reviews that we do for clients, because we have yet to do a compliance review and not find something that has been jacked up, something that needed to be addressed, something that needed to be changed. And I'm not talking about minor stuff. Not once. In every single compliance review we have done, we have found something. Some of it was minor, some of it was major, but we have yet to find one fund that was completely buttoned up. And that's not exaggeration. This is just the reality of how this program works. There are nuances to it. There's complications. And there are things that if you are not practicing this, if you're not dreaming about it on a regular basis, you're going to miss. And so people that are utilizing folks that don't do nothing but Opportunity Zones are missing nuances, and they're jacking up either their filings, their audit trail, or something that they've done. And heading into December 31st, 2026, that reality has real dollar consequences. Let me walk you through why. July 4th, 2025. I was in Washington, D.C. It was a beautiful July 4th. We're talking flyovers. As the one big beautiful bill was signed into law, and Opportunity Zones went from a temporary program to a permanent feature of the tax code. Most people caught the headline. Here's what most people missed. Permanence does not mean your existing obligations under your Opportunity Zone fund went away. It does not mean that you got a gimme. It does not mean that it got extended somehow magically. It means the clock on your deferred tax bill kept running. We were trying to get an extension of 2 years on that. But instead of giving us an extension, they made it permanent. And so there was actually a really good thing. The problem is that a lot of people were counting on that extension in order to get their ducks in a row. But December 31st, 2026 is when deferred gains come due for every original OZ investor. April 15th, 2027 is when the check goes out. For those that need to pay estimated, it's actually going to be before that. That date has not moved. It is not negotiable. These are well-settled IRS rules relative to when taxes come due. And this tax comes due December 31st of 2026. At the same time, the compliance requirements under OZ 2.0 and under the One Big Beautiful Bill for funds that were set up prior to enactment are now more serious than anything that existed under OZ 1.0. These new requirements kick in this year for 2026. So you got two things happening. You got a tax bill coming due on one hand, and tighter compliance requirements and reporting requirements on the other. That's the situation that every single OZ investor is navigating right now. Let me be specific about what changed, because this is where most investors and even most advisors are behind. QOFs are now required to file detailed annual informational returns electronically. That is new, right? It's new relative to the detailed information. Most of it is still going to be caught up on the 8996, and that's how you're actually going to file. But you've got to file them with your return. And most people file electronically with their returns. QOZBs also now have their own separate reporting obligations to the QOFs that own their interest. That is also new. And the penalties for this, getting it wrong, are real. $500 per day in fines, up to $10,000 a day, up to $10,000 in totality for smaller funds. It's up to $50,000 for larger funds. These penalties apply to all active QOFs, including ones that were formed under OZ 1.0. If you have a fund that's been operating since 2018 or 2019, and you have not looked at your compliance posture recently, you need to. Here's the other thing I see constantly. People assume that because they worked with a professional to set up their fund, that everything is fine. And in many cases, the setup was done correctly. But the ongoing obligations, the annual filings, the substantial improvement tests, the working capital safe harbor documentation, the qualified opportunity zone business requirements, these ongoing obligations are where most funds start to slip. We get this actually fairly often. I think that we've probably set up more qualified opportunity funds than anybody in the country. And if we set your stuff up, we set it up correctly. But once we did that, you actually had to go about doing the business of the fund. You had to go about doing all of those things that I mentioned correctly. And if you haven't done it, then you're not going to be in compliance. And that's what we're talking about here. The program does not require you to ask for permission from anyone. That's the greatest thing about it. You get to operate as of right, but the burden of proof is entirely on you. If you get audited, if you get scrutinized, you better have a clean audit trail that demonstrates compliance with every stage of your investment. Let me walk you through the specific areas where we consistently find gaps when we do compliance reviews. So the first is the annual form filings. Form 8996 for the QOF and Form 8949 originally on your original investment, and then Form 8997 on an annual basis for individual investors. These need to be filed correctly and on time. Let me restate that, on time every year. And so you don't have to file by March 15th, but you better make sure that you have an extension filed. Missing or incorrect filings are the most common issue we find, and they create immediate exposure because it's information that the IRS's bots are going to pick up, right? This is automatic stuff that's going to be feeding in, and it's going to be flagging your return for further review or for the IRS to come in and investigate. You know, the great thing about the service, and I got to hand it to them, as it relates to opportunity zones. When this program first came out, it was, it actually got a ton of interest, but there wasn't a whole lot of guidance about how to do it. And people, not surprisingly, were jacking it up. They were filing Form 8996 for their fund and for their QOZB. And the IRS, instead of just automatically auditing those people, actually sent letters to say, hey, we think that you did something incorrectly here. You need to then go about fixing it. So I got to hand it to the service that within this dynamic that they've actually been pretty gracious about it. The question is, how long is that going to happen? So when we're talking about millions, potentially millions of dollars of taxes on the line relative to whether you did this wrong or whether you did this right, the IRS is going to have a specific incentive in order to come back and to look at your documentation and to see whether you did it correctly or incorrectly. And a missed filing is an easy way to say, nope, you don't get to do it. You don't get to take it. And by the way, that $1 million of tax savings that you thought you were going to get, nope, that's not going to happen. So that's the biggest thing that we see. And that's the number one concern and what we really focus on relative to like the cursory review. The second is the 90% asset test. QOFs are required to hold at least 90% of their assets in qualified opportunity zone property. This is tested twice a year. If your fund is not structured and documented correctly to pass this test, you are out of compliance regardless of where your money is actually invested. Now, where we see this really happen is when people put money into their QOF and then they don't have an immediate deal. And so they go put it into the market or they need it for something else, which is okay. They can loan it out to themselves, but they either don't have the liquidity or they don't pay attention to the time frame on when they need to get it back into the fund and drop down into a QOZB. This is the second thing that we really focus on, is making sure that people are hitting that 90% test. This is what we really hit in Ascent when we're on our weekly mastermind call. We are going through these things for people, particularly as we near the deadlines for folks. We're not in the hunt for, that June deadline yet. I guess I should say we are in the hunt. We're not up like really hardcore at the deadline, but you need to be paying attention to this by prior to this June 30th deadline. Have you cleared the money out of your QOF? Have you done that correctly? Do you have a paper trail showing how that's going to be done? Have you dropped it down into qualified opportunity zone business property in the form of a QOZB or in a direct deal? Have you done that correctly? That's what we're helping people to look at in the context of the 90% test. The next one is substantial improvement documentation. If your investment involved improving an existing property, you need to document that you doubled the value of the existing structure within the 30-month window. Or if you're in a rural zone, number one, you got the documentation to prove that you're in a rural zone and that you have increased it by more than 50%. A lot of times we see this documentation missing or where it's not complete. Working capital safe harbor. If your fund used the working capital safe harbor to hold cash while deploying into a business, that safe harbor has specific requirements, including a written plan that has to be substantially followed. If that documentation is not in your file, you have a problem. It's a serious problem, because if you don't have that, you've now blown the 5% non-qualified financial property test. Realistically, you've also probably blown the 70% good asset test. And so, once again, it's not that complicated, but you need to make sure that it's there. QZB qualification. The business inside your fund, right, when you put your money from a QOF down to a QOZB, it has to meet specific asset, income, and activity tests. I just mentioned a couple of them: 70% asset test, your 50% gross income test, your 5% non-qualified financial property tests, and that you are an active trader business throughout the fund's holding period. This is not a one-time check. It's an ongoing obligation, and it's the area where we find serious gaps. Here's the reality heading into the back half of 2026. The December 31st deadline is creating urgency across the entire OZ ecosystem. That means more attention, more scrutiny. We'll see if the IRS uses this, and now they're going to now come in and start to really take a look at opportunity zones. Heretofore, it's been very few opportunity zone transactions that have actually gone through an audit. And usually it's because of something else, and then they just cursorily glance at the opportunity zone piece. Namely, because there's not been any OZ funds that have actually gotten to the 10-year hold. Also, people are in their deferral window. Now that we're hitting December 31st, 2026, that has the potential to change. Now, all of a sudden, we've got a deadline. We've got taxes due. We've got people doing creative things to minimize those taxes. And so, realistically and rationally, it would make sense that the IRS would now start to focus on this. And so, as a result of this, we need investors to be asking questions, but those investors asking questions, right, is creating burden. It creates demand. We also are seeing, and rightfully so, I think we're going to see more and more IRS attention on a program that's now permanent and involves significant tax benefits. There's also strategies available to offset your December 31st tax bill. Things like solar credits, cost segregation, bonus depreciation, and other really creative strategies that we have vetted and that we're working with investors to minimize their taxes when they go to pay the tax in April of 2027. Valuation discounts. The issue is that these strategies take time to implement correctly. You cannot start in November and expect to be in good shape. Namely, because you're most of the stuff that you're going to be going into or you have the potential to go into is probably going to be gone by then, because the demand and people understanding the demand and folks listening to webinars like this are understanding that the demand is going to pick up in Q3. Probably Q2, right? So like when we are heading into July, when most people are on vacation, the smart money is going to be hunting deals that can offset those taxes. And so if you're like, I'm going to wait till after Halloween, I would be very concerned about that. Before you even think about offsetting strategies, you need to know that your fund is clean. Because if your compliance is shaky, layering strategies on top of a shaky foundation could potentially create more risk for you, not less. The investors who are going to be fine on the other side of December 31st are the ones who got a clear, honest picture of where they stand right now, and they built a plan around it with enough runway to execute. All right, let's talk about advisors and professionals. If you advise clients with OZ Investments, here is your direct takeaway. Your clients, if they are not already, and the smart ones are, or they should be, if they're not, they're going to start asking serious questions about their funds heading into that deadline. The advisors who can speak to compliance clearly and who have a specialist partner who can actually review and fix issues are going to be indispensable. The advisors who cannot are going to lose those conversations because they're going to have to come to someone who can. You do not need to become a compliance expert. You do not need to become an opportunity zone expert. You need to know when to bring one in. We work alongside CPAs, RIAs, and advisors every single day. You keep the client relationship, we bring the compliance infrastructure, documentation review, and the execution. That's the partnership. Here's where I want to leave you. After everything we just covered, you are probably in one of two places right now. The first place is you have general questions about your situation. You're not sure if you need a full review. You have some gains questions, maybe some tax mitigation questions, and you just want to sit down with someone who actually knows this program and talk it through. That's Blueprint. One dedicated session with me where we go through your specific situation from top to bottom, your gains, your fund, your timeline, your compliance posture. We figure out where you stand and what your next right move looks like. You walk away with a written roadmap and a month of access to me and the team to keep working through it after your session. The second place is that you have that gut feeling, something gnawing at you that things might not be completely dialed in. You've been operating your fund for a while and you just have this nagging sense that if someone actually looked into your documents, they might find something. And that something might not be something that you would be really stoked about. That's what our review is for. Now, I want to tell you something. We used to call this a mock audit. Then we looked at the statistics and found out that most Americans would rather get mugged than go through an IRS audit. So we decided to eliminate the word audit from our vocabulary entirely. What we want instead is for you to have your documents reviewed by someone friendly before you potentially end up sitting across the table from Uncle Sam. And I'll tell you this, not only are we a lot nicer than the IRS, we are way more fun and better looking. Well, here's how it works. You upload your documents through our secure portal. We go through everything and we schedule a call to walk you through exactly what needs to be fixed, along with any strategies relevant to your situation. Things like valuation discounts and other tax mitigation options that could make a real difference heading into year end. If you already know the review is what you need, you do not have to start with Blueprint. We are more than happy to go right to it. Not sure which one is right for you? That's exactly what Blueprint is for. And if we get on your session and realize the review is what you actually need, we're going to tell you that forthwith. Both options are available. The link is in the chat. My calendar is limited and the price on Blueprint is going up. The people who move on this today, and that's for review as well, get priority scheduling before the spots fill up, before our dance card gets full. If the question I asked at the beginning of this session, would you be ready if the IRS sent you an audit notice tomorrow, is still sitting with you, that's your sign. You've driven down the road and you've seen those billboards that say, this is your sign. The team and I are giving you this sign, and we're about to take your questions live. Bring it. All right, we got Mike. Hopefully everybody can still hear me. I think that we're good. I got Jake, the producer, who's talking in my ear. Jake, are we good volume-wise? Awesome. He's replied back in the affirmative. I love it. I just showed David's comment, getting all your docs in a row. Hey, I'm gonna have to use that one in the future. So thanks, David. I appreciate that. Not sure if you got any other questions, but keep them coming. And Jake, if you wouldn't mind, I know that you put the chat, some of the chat, and not sure what was going on, like where I didn't pick them up, but when I call out the questions, if you wouldn't mind pulling them up on screen, that would be awesome. But once again, glad you guys stuck around. Before we get into those questions, I just want to let everybody know that after tomorrow, right? So after May 1st, the price on Blueprint doubles because we've had great success in filling up our initial slots. We've been at $500 since we launched, and that changes after May 1st. So if anything in the session resonated and you're like, hey, listen, I want to go ahead and get a Blueprint done, now's the time to move. Links in the chat. All right, let's jump into the questions. All right, this is Alfred's question, and he says, you just formed his LLC on January 15th, an OZ 1.0 fund. Can I convert into OZ 2.0? Or do I have no options but to pay my capital gains taxes by April 15th of 2027? It's not 2017, but 2027. And Alfred, that's actually a great question. And we've been dealing with this with a couple of different people, is that if you funded a 1.0 deal and you're concerned about that and you're like, hey, listen, I want to roll this into 2.0, and you've got a compelling reason as to why you want to do that. And you need to have a compelling business reason. So you like the 2.0 tracks better because those don't get designated until after January 1st of 2027, or you want to go into a professionally managed firm. So Alfred, if you were interested in going into a fund like Origin or Caliber or into the OZ Pros fund, we've got a fund and we are investing into some really cool, boat and RV storage facilities. And it looks like the boat and RV storage facility that we did in Taylor, Texas is actually going to be potentially a chip play. And so we'll probably actually be doing another round of capital, and we will probably actually be setting up a 2.0 fund. And so accordingly, if you were interested in that, I think that would give you a reason as to why you needed to trip an inclusion event. And then if you trip an inclusion event this year, at any point in time this year, because you have the choice of when you want to start your 180 days, you could put your money in January 2nd of 2027, and now you're going to be able to take advantage of 2.0. Let's go to that next question, Jake, if you don't mind. And all right, Vivek, I formed two separate LLCs, one each for the fund, another for operations in 2021. Only the fund LLCs was filed since 2021 with 99% partnership in the operating LLC. There hasn't been a 1065 file for the operating LLC, which that's a challenge because what you're going to end up having to do is to go back and to your point, amend. And I don't know that you can go all the way back to 2021, but if you could show that there wasn't activity, then that's okay. But to the extent that you spent money, and I think that that's inside of your stuff, is that you're probably going to have to go back and get those filed so that way you can actually put those expenses on the books. One thing that I think would actually really make sense for you, Vivek, is for us to do a complete review of your aggregate situation, to actually go back through and to look at your bank records, go back through and to look at the 1065, make sure that your 8996 was filed with the fund and that that's been done correctly. And so we'd be happy to get you in the queue for that review. Once again, we're stacking those up. It's amazing how, and I'm glad that we've got people coming in now because we've got bandwidth right now. We just got done with tax filing season. We're headed into the summer. The summer is typically slow for tax mitigation stuff. So let's do your stuff while we're in the summer, while we've got bandwidth to be able to get this done and we can actually make it happen. Because I know that we're going to be, and does that mean that the filing obligation for the QOZB starts only on OZ 2.0 starting this year, and there is no need for it in 1.0? So the filing, the enhanced filing obligations under the One Big Beautiful Bill, those kick in for this year, for December, from January to December of 2026. So those will apply to 1.0 funds, but we're waiting on the revised Form 8996. So you don't actually have to make that filing this year for 2025, but you will have to make the enhanced reporting for next year. And in reality, the real stuff that you got to pay attention to are the jobs created. And we're specifically working with people to come up with what that number is. And we will be working with folks relative to like what needs to happen, when that happens for next year. And so, the good thing is that I think we got a little bit of bandwidth on that. Key thing is that you need to be paying attention to making sure that you actually had your stuff filed previously and up till this year. And I think we have one more final question inside of that other new to OZF as an exit gain strategy. Where do I learn more basic information? Molly, that's awesome. We've actually got we'd be happy to send this to you. We've got videos. Your easiest and best bet would be to schedule a blueprint, and we can jump in. We can talk about your situation. We can also talk about your other taxes, because we've got the ability to be able to go back 3 years and be able to make a difference in those taxes back 3 years. And so set a blueprint call. Let's jump into it. And we can, in that, you're going to get all of our basic information. So it's basically me walking through opportunity zones on a page. I'm going to walk through the cheat sheet. I'm going to walk through and give you the basics so that you can watch that over and over again. You're also going to get a month of access to Ascent. And so we'd love to have you in there, and you can get your questions answered there. We also do a beginner's Ascent once a month. And so you can jump into there, and we go over the basics. We hit that every time. And then you've actually got access to that video where I go over this in detail. I know that do we have any other questions? I think we had another question inside of all right, we've got a question here from Gabe. Are there any new reporting requirements in 2026 beyond the 8996 and 8997 forms? Yes, Gabe, there are, and that's specifically what they put into the One Big Beautiful Bill. Now, QOZBs actually have an obligation to report to the QOFs the information that they need in order to file Form 8996. And then in addition to the stuff that you have been filing on Form 8996, then now we're going to actually have to file how many jobs were created inside of the opportunity zone. Now, that's more art than science. And so we are specifically working with some groups. We're, I don't know when we're going to have this out, and so I hate to, to tease it, but we're actually working on an aggregate AI compliance software that we will be rolling out to the public. And inside of that, we're actually trying to build that functionality out inside of that software as part of an accoutrement to our compliance services. So we can absolutely help you. So that's going to be the first thing, is that we're going to be using the software in our compliance service to make sure that all the glitches are done. Because I've seen lots of compliance folks and people try to do this inside of opportunity zones, is that they've tried to roll out a compliance software, but they get it out there and people don't understand how to use it because they don't understand OZs. So it's like, hey, man, if the software doesn't walk you through that in comprehensive detail and you jack it up, how are you going to know? And so what we're doing is we are utilizing the software in our compliance service where you've got a person that's actually going through it, making sure that it's done correctly, asking the hard questions, making sure that the AI is not hallucinating, making sure that you got your stuff dialed and that you have your ducks in a row and that you are good to go. And then as we work out the kinks in the software, we will be able to we'll be able to then roll that out as just a software service, which I'm kind of excited about. All right, so I just hit Gabe's again. I'm going to hit Taylor's now. You mentioned the IRS has been relatively gracious so far with OZ compliance issues. Do you think that changes as we get closer to December 31st and funds start hitting their 10-year hold? Absolutely, unequivocally. And the reason is this, like up till now, the IRS hasn't had really a dog in the fight. What are they going to do, right? So they're going to actually like just hold you up on your, they're going to get you for your deferred, gains. Yeah, I don't think there's not a whole lot of incentive for the IRS to mess with that. But as we go into filing for December 31st, 2026, and now the taxes become due on that deferral, right? Now the IRS has the ability to be able to go back and say, oh, no, you didn't correctly do this. You actually should have paid these taxes. Or if you're going to do a valuation discount, then certainly that's going to be something that they would have, incentive to go back and to check. So you want to make sure that you've got your stuff, you got your docs in a row, you're dialed, your experts are dialed, and you need to make sure that they're good to go. Second part of Taylor's question is for a CPA who has a client with an OZ fund they did not set up. Oh man, these new questions come in and then it kicks me out. So if they didn't set it up, what's the fastest way to assess whether that fund has compliance exposure? So the fastest way is to hire us to do a review, and we'll do it. We crank them out. If you want to do the review, or if the CPA wants to do the review, the second fastest way would be to join Ascent and come in there and to start listening to the things that are happening and to get your questions answered. The third way is that you want to look at, and if you're going to do this on your own and you're going to kind of run this to ground, which I don't recommend, I would definitely get some more information on this. The first thing that we're going to want to look at and that you're going to want to look at is the 8996. Have they been timely filed? Does the 8996 match up with the QOZB interest? Do all of the census tracts match up? Does the property owned in those census tracts match up with the balance sheet? And are there any other glaring inconsistencies just relative to the documentation? Have they met the 90% test, right? Do you have a balance sheet for June 30th to back up June 30th and December 31st to back up the 90% test that you indicated on the 8996, or that they indicated on the 8996? Those are the like the layups. And then once you start diving into that, then that'll give you, if there's a little bit of nuance in there, then that will allow you to be able to do a deeper dive into the specifics of their situation. So I am going down. All right. And Gabe actually asked this. Yeah. Are the new reporting requirements for job creation for the QOF for 8996 data structured onto specific forms, or does the QOZB need to decide how it records and reports this info? If there are new forms, do we know the numbers yet? And Gabe, the answer is no, we don't. I don't believe that they're going to use a new form. I believe that they will probably just add it to the 8996. And like I said before, I think that they'll probably add that in to the 8996 and have the fund actually report it to the service. And then the QOZBs will be responsible for getting that information up to the fund so that way they can put it into the 8996. All right. Frederick, I hope that you were able to get in. I know that you had some issues with video and stuff like that, but I hope that you got in, and I hope that you, not sure if you got any questions or anything else. I think we hit the All the questions inside of the chat. I'm going to check this real fast. And all right, look at this. We got another one. How does a June 30th 90% asset test deadline interact with the December 31st recognition date for investors who are trying to offset their tax bill? So, Taylor, I'm assuming that you're talking about like your June 30th of this year, and then you're talking about December 31st of this year, and potentially you're talking about maybe a trip and roll where you're going to try to distribute the cash out of the QOF, because if you did that, it would be eligible to be rolled into a 2.0 deal. Once again, assuming that you have a compelling business reason as to why you're doing that, and that you're not just doing it to defer taxes, that the June 30th test, you would need to either distribute out prior to that, or you would have to have it invested into adequate property prior to the June 30th test. Now, ultimately, if you're going to, because at the end of the year, those two factor out and factor into the 90% test. So if you were thinking about distributing it, you may want to go ahead and do that prior to June 30th. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, if you've got it adequately squared away, then you're going to be good. So a lot of it depends on when you put the cash into the fund, right. So in this case, and I don't know if this is your case or not, but in the case where you have dropped the cash from your fund down to the QOZB, and you're basically going to be distributing cash from the QOZB up to the QOF, I would not do that prior to June 30th. I would wait until after June 30th, because that's going to cover it in the working capital safe harbor. I think that covers the question, but if you've got any further details on that, bounce it into the chat. Okay, Frederick's got a question. Fund purchased 2 pieces of land in different states to do OZB. Is it okay to sell one to the fund, the second, sell one to fund? Oh, is it okay to sell? I thought to the fund. Is it okay to sell one to fund the second because you had funding issues? The second piece of land has started in almost finished construction. Yeah, absolutely. You can do that. Now, if you sell the first one, and we go through this in detail on a couple of different videos, we hit this in Ascent regularly. And these are the videos that you get access to when you join Ascent. And in it, I've got a specific thing about the 3 ways the 3 courses of action that you can do when you generate a gain, an interim gain is what we call them, prior to 10-year hold, which is what you would be talking about here, is that you can either distribute the cash, right, and then reinvest it. So you could reinvest it into a 2.0, and now you're going to get a 5-year deferral, which I think that would probably be the best choice here. Or you could invest the entire amount and then just pay the gains from taxes from somewhere else. Maybe not necessarily the best idea, particularly because you've got the ability, because it's a sale to a third party, you could distribute the cash out to yourself, reinvest it into the fund after January 1st. And now you got a 5-year deferral and a 10% reduction, potentially even a 30% reduction if you're in a rural qualified opportunity fund. Now that's on the capital gain. On the basis, so whatever you put into that lot, you've got the ability to put that back. You put it up to the QOF, and now you got 12 months to reinvest it. So you could absolutely put that into property 2 or QOZB2. So you could distribute it up to the QOF, put it into QOZB2, and as long as you do that within 12 months, you're good to go. If anybody's got final call for any more questions, I'm not seeing any come in. And so, like I said, before I let you go, after tomorrow, the blueprint price is doubled. And so if the question I asked at the beginning of this session, would you be ready if the IRS showed up tomorrow, is still sitting with you, that's your sign. Link is in the chat. Grab it before you close this window. Thanks for being here, and look forward to talking with you on Blueprint. Look forward to seeing you in Ascent. Look forward to helping you guys with your opportunity zone situation. And like I said before, we're really trying to get people to act now. Don't wait. Smart money plays checkers. Sorry, smart money plays chess, not checkers. And so chess requires time. We want to get you guys in while you got time to be able to do this stuff.